Great, great. How are you feeling?
Oh, really good.
Students coming domestic, international to NOIC, how are they dealing with pressure?
Students do experience pressure to do well academically and do very well in their academic programs in a environment in a world where entrance to top level universities.
What do we say to parents, who are like, okay, I'm sending my son and daughter, across the pond or crossing multiple oceans to Canada, and this is the first time they're leaving home. What are some of the anxieties for students coming to a boarding school? And
Onboarding for our students is important. Care from our boarding staff and those who offer activities is very important. And then that care extends directly into very strong communication with folks such as our principals and mentors, which is featured here at the school.
and AI always pops his head up, right? And it's like, what do we do with AI and students using AI and technology in the classroom now? Does that change anything? Is it something that we should kind of embrace?
Interaction with AI doesn't take us away from interaction, student interaction with each other and with the human. I believe there will always be need for human connection, for students to be connected to each other, to other students, and be connected to the world and to teachers. So I think that's probably my best advice: is never sit back, never keep doing what you're doing for its own sake. Always be a learner, be a young, wide-eyed learner, and be in that process of being born.
Great, great. How are you feeling?
Oh, really good, much better.
Before we get started, so tell me about yourself, where you're from, what you like to do, a little bit of your
Oh,
background.
as we get started. So yeah, so I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Ajax, Ontario, actually, a little town outside of Toronto, and I'm from a family of educators. My father is a educator from an administrator from Brebeuf College originally, and boy, my great grandfather was superintendent of schools in Toronto. So I come from this long line of teachers and educators in the Toronto area. And I've always been attracted to teaching and education in general. So it's just sort of been a natural direction for me, a natural path. Um, and I've become very interested in how learning works, particularly the cultural influences on learning. And that, I suppose, has come from my experience, my early experience in Toronto teaching international students and also being overseas. So another sort of interest or reason why I've stayed with education and been very passionate about it is in some of the places I've worked, there isn't a functioning middle class, and I'm quite aware of the fact that education, strong international education, helps build a rational middle class in society and it really therefore builds social fabric, in my opinion, in such countries.
Awesome. I mean, that's great that you share those values. Now, you're well traveled. You taught everywhere in the world, the Middle East, the Caribbean, I think a bit of Africa, Asia. What sets them all apart? What do you find different, and what would you say some of the synergies are?
Yeah, well, I would say the influence again. I'm very interested in and I've observed and seen and researched the influence of culture on education. So, well, different cultures give rise to different schema around the world, mental models for how to perceive the world. I I love the variety and the differences in different cultures and how they approach learning. And I've had several aha moments in the classroom, where students have said, "Wait a minute, we don't do it that way." I remember lining up students to do a test when I was first at AIS in Egypt, and some students clustered in groups, and they said, "Well, wait a minute, this is kind of how we're used to doing things," and I had to sort of take a look at my own assumptions, and so that was kind of neat. So I really find it interesting, the different cultural schema, these mental models that for how people do things in different national and local contexts, which I think is really neat. But by the same token, I find students are students, kids are kids around the world too. There's great common themes that are independent of factors such as culture. So I love the similarity and the universality of students and their desire to learn and grow. And yet also there are these cultural differences that make it so interesting between different contexts.
Absolutely. And with your great knowledge, experience, and I've known you personally, and and the way
Yeah, I've
you
been very
build,
happy about that,
and the
Arthur.
way you build
You were
rapport with
my
people.
guide in some ways as I arrived here with certain things to do in your
No,
field.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and the way you build rapport with people, you take your time, you listen, and you share your values, which is, I think, very important in especially in education today. Now, looking at all your experience, you come with wealth of experience. Why did you pick NOIC? What stood out about NOIC?
Well, what I really like about NOIC is the multiple program pathways. I've been head of several schools around the world, and I've noticed that it's a good idea to offer more than one pathway to students because there are different groups of students usually within the same school. So offering only one pathway sometimes doesn't suit all the students, and so it's better to have multiple pathways. So I really like the fact that there's IB, there's the A-level program, and there's OSSD. So there's really different pathways for different students based upon their strengths and interests and passions. I like that and I believe in it. And I've strongly supported that in previous schools I've been in where there's been one pathway, I've advocated for a second one. So, yeah.
No, I mean, I so agree with you, and you coming in NOIC and kind of promoting those pathways does go a long way. Now, at MSM, when we speak to students, we share NOIC's motto, start here and go anywhere, right? I mean, I don't think we can add as much value as you could, when you say, okay, we say start here, go anywhere. What does that actually mean to a student?
Well, again, it really means that students pick their pathway and chart their course towards university. In our case, most of our students almost everybody goes to university, and they're well supported. So the fact that there is a choice and strong support means that they can go anywhere, and NOIC prepares students for these individual journeys. So I think you need the programs, but the programs aren't enough. You also need the support structure, and we have a fabulous mentorship program here that supports students so they can make choices about their individual pathways. So
Yeah, and just piggybacking off that what you just shared is, you're big on community. What does strong school and community really bring to the students, and um, what would they really need to know about building the community? Because we're talking about international students. Some of them are very familiar with the Canadian education, some of them not so much. But when we talk about, the Canadian culture and the Canadian pedagogy, building community for us is something very different uh, than for an international student that's coming from kind of an environment where it's just I just need to focus on myself, and now I need to understand what does building a community mean, and a strong school like NOIC, which is kind of promoting that. What would we say about that to students? How would
yeah.
we share that message?
Yeah, what are the components of a school community, and what are the indicators, I suppose, of a school community? And I've been really fortunate. I got to travel around the world and be in many schools as a teacher, as a school head, as a principal, and as an accreditor. So I've got to see a whole mixture of these schools to the point where when I kind of go into a school, I can kind of feel the culture and the community in a school in the first few minutes. You kind of get practiced at it. So some of the indicators for me and what we promote here at NOIC is students being the focus. So the student interest, student passions, the development of programs. Students must remain the focus of a healthy school. And that means student leadership, that we want to see evidence of student leadership, and we want to promote student voice and student leadership. And therefore, student choice in things like projects, assignments, and pathways. Not that students get to do anything they want, any project they want to do, but there should be at appropriate times the idea of student agency, student choice in choosing what they are interested in to the extent possible within the context of a project or an assignment.
No, no, I totally
You
agree.
know, and then do you feel the positive energy in the hallways and classrooms? And I certainly do here. It's one of the joys of being here is that if I pop into a classroom, I get a bunch of smiles and I see the students engaged and see the students really interested in what's happening and having a voice in what's happening. So those are indicators. And last is very important is the is the school a learning organization? So, is everyone interested in learning and implementing a new program? And are new ideas welcome? And that's very, very important. So those are some primary indicators of what's important to see in a school culture, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Mark. Well said. Now, I want to touch on, students coming domestic, international to NOIC. How are they dealing with pressure? Because we know parents put a lot of pressure on students that, you need to get, achieve those grades because you want to move on to some of the best universities that NOIC partners with, like U of T, you have UBC, you have York, Waterloo, Ottawa, all these large top tier universities. How are students dealing with pressure?
Well, I think there's a couple of sources of pressure, and I think you've hit the primary one on the nose, which is students do experience pressure to do well academically and do very well in their academic programs in a environment in a world where entrance to top level universities is probably a little bit more competitive than it was perhaps when you and I went through the system 150 years ago, myself anyway. um,
Me
and
too.
but what that really requires is what I like about NOIC in this regard is that you need a strong teaching staff, and we have a very strong teaching staff here, and our results show that. But also there's strong student support in the form of the mentorship program that we have here at the Academy that offers really strong individual support to students. So I think that's a big piece of it. Um, but also I think what youth are experiencing, young students are experiencing too, is the pressure of trying to see where does the high school and university path lead me? What is my purpose? Where will I fit in at the end of that path? Does it lead to a good job? Does it lead to something that I'm interested and passionate about? And I think that's where international education, that's a good direction where many schools are going. And we've certainly instituted the extracurricular program is to give students experiences outside the classroom to help them see and understand their passions, their interests, and where those might lead ultimately.
And I credit that to you, Mark, because you have that infectious attitude that you bring. You
You're
have
very
that.
kind, Arthur. You're
No, you
very
have
kind.
you have that infectious smile that you're always smiling, and I'm sure it rubs off on the students when they see that. At the same time, I know that you're a strong believer in high achievement and making sure that from a pedagogy side that we are crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. Um, what would you say about what's the one thing you would want to share when students are, coming to NOIC? What would you want to share about the school for themselves to kind of, you know, buy into the culture, buy into, what NOIC stands for, what you believe in, and how do we make it the place to be for students to understand that the quality of education, the academia piece, is second to none. And when they set those goals, that I'm coming to NOIC, I'm going to get my high school diploma, be it an IB, be it in A levels, or the OSSD. How do I get to that next step? To be one of the top students going to UFT or going to York, or one of the top universities that you partner with, Queens, and the list goes on. What would the one thing you would tell students to prepare themselves for?
Yeah, I would let students, and I do chat with students, and I let them know I want to make sure students know they have full agency. That the most important thing is that students know that they're in the driver's seat and that they can make choices and set goals that in line with their interests, but they're in the driver's seat. So and the students need to believe in themselves, and it's part of the school's job to help them with that and provide them with the academics and experience to do that. But I would shorten that path to the extent I could by imbuing our new students as much as possible with their complete understanding that they have agency, that they're in the driver's seat, and that they can work hard. They work hard, do their academics, do very well, but also take advantages. I would like them to take advantages of all the experiences, both within and outside of the classroom, to to help them find their purpose in the world. And that as they engage in those activities, they try as much as possible to take advantage of those opportunities that get the student outside of themselves, right? Because it's always lovely to do things like service, lovely to do things that involve collaboration with other students outside of the self. Um, and that usually brings a pretty good sense of satisfaction to learners and to students. So those would be the two components, I think, is students as agency and taking advantage of activities and experiences that
Oh, thank
kind
you.
of get you outside yourself.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, yeah.
Now let's just move on to the audience piece. At MSM, we work with our partners are at every corner of the globe. The Middle East, North Africa, Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia. Who, when we look at students, all students are welcome. We always say that, and we definitely believe on the outcomes and the journeys. What kind of students would really thrive at NOIC? Is it students from all parts of the world, of the globe? Or, we have certain students really thrive in the environment
Hmm.
of NOIC, or all are welcome, and no student is different from the other. Everyone is, kind of given the same opportunity. In my view, I think that's what it is, but you know, I would love to
Yeah,
hear your thought on it.
yeah. Yeah, I think students who come to NOIC, I think if you're NOIC bound, you're a student who's looking for strong academic programs that lead to acceptance in top universities. I think that's probably the premier characteristic of the students who come to us. Our students are university bound. They're very capable students. They do very well. I think also students who are looking to form strong connections with their teachers and peers because the academic programs here, especially the IB and the OSSD, they're collaborative in nature. You do group work in classrooms, you do group presentations, and you are working with each other inside and outside of the classroom. So I think strong connections are important. And then students who are looking for clubs and experiences outside of the classroom straight. So those would be the three, I think the three uh, um,
Key
uh,
points.
goals or points that students would be looking for students who are coming to our school. I think those would be three top criteria that they would consider when selecting us.
So in short, I would summarize it that all students are welcome and they get the same level of attention and dedication
Yeah, I think so.
that NOIC provides on their journey to whatever their goals are, right?
Yep, I
Or
think
you
I
set the
think
goals
yep, we
as
have the
well.
programs for a wide array of students. However, we are academically focused, and I think it's important to know that. But of course, we have so many pathways that we can serve a broad variety of students.
What do we say to parents, who are like, okay, I'm sending my son and daughter, across the pond or crossing multiple oceans to Canada, and this is the first time they're leaving home. What are some of the anxieties for students coming to a boarding school? And what should we be sharing with parents when we're having those discussions about, NOIC and, of course, the security and the environment and the culture, that the student doesn't get homesick in the first week and says, I want to go back. This is not what I signed up for. How do we deal with that?
Yeah.
How do we kind of share that with the parents?
Yeah, well, the students who come and stay with us, most of them are in the boarding program, and the boarding staff are lovely. So it's very important that our boarding staff are caring, which they are, and that we have care and safety in our boarding. We're located at right now, our residence is located at Seneca, and it is an absolutely lovely boarding and safe boarding environment. So I think onboarding for our students is important. Care from our boarding staff and those who offer activities is very important. And then that care extends directly into very strong communication with folks such as our principals and mentors, which is featured here at the school. So yeah, I think that our parents need to know that our primary concerns are safety and care as part of the onboarding process, so that students feel safe, they feel cared for as they get to know their peers. as they come here, as they come to the school.
Mark, so let's talk about education. And you've been an educator for decades. Has anything changed about the way you think learning actually works?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think there's been fundamental changes to the learning process since I wouldn't presume to make such a statement. But in terms of what my understanding is and how learning works, I've really come to see and practice the connections between what students are learning and their prior learning, their prior understandings in the form of cultural schema, in the forms of the content that they know before. And I've really come to appreciate through experience how students connect their existing learning to prior learning. So that's really important. So I find it really important that especially educators connect what is happening in a physics lesson to what students might know before to help them extend their learning a little bit. And I've also come to see the power of students having a sense of purpose around why they're learning something. So it's absolutely fine to do it within a group, to do an assignment for a teacher. That's great. That's how the system works. But when they do it with each other, sometimes when students do an assignment in a group, the purpose is then extended to the group in terms of making sure that it's well done. But I really like it when students can connect an assignment or a paper to what's happening in the real world to a certain extent to it. And I find that imbues students with an even greater sense of purpose around their work. So I'm really kind of sold on the idea that student experience can contribute to student learning and giving students a greater sense of purpose and agency in their learning. So yeah, always evolving programs in that direction.
Thank you
Yeah, yeah.
for your view on that. Now, you know, when I have conversations, or some of my colleagues, when we have conversations, and AI always pops his head up, right? And it's like, what do we do with AI and students using AI and technology in the classroom now? Does that change anything? Is it something that we should kind of embrace as students, as educators, and say, well, this is the future, and we need to accept it? Or do you think there could be checks and balances in place where students are actually, have some thought process, and when they are writing papers, posting discussions, the lateral thinking piece is kind of lost with AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that AI will become part of the teaching and learning process. It's happening. It's not coming. It's happening, and it's up to us to keep up and move forward and be innovative with it. I think some good directions for AI will be a lot of the propositional knowledge, the knowledge and concept features of teaching will really be able to be mediated particularly well by AI through using AI such as tools as collaborative partners and tutors. I think that works really, really well. And I think also AI will allow us to track student assessments and allow us to track student achievement in ways that are much more sophisticated and much more individual to the student because the systems are now much more powerful. Students can achieve something as part of a learning outcome, and that can be tracked and set up in a very sophisticated way. And I think that's what's coming. But cautions on AI, it's not a replacement for thought, for synthesis and integration, and students will need to be demonstrating those performances, especially when it comes to synthetic arguments and integration of information. I think that will remain a valued performance. That's what I think for the next little while. And we'll also have to watch that interaction with AI doesn't take us away from student interaction with each other and with the human. I believe there will always be need for human connection, for students to be connected to each other, to other students, and be connected to the world and to teachers. So the challenge will be how do we move forward as learning conceptual knowledge can be mediated by and supported by an AI tutor. How do we retain that human connection between students and each other and students and the community and the teacher. So how do we navigate that terrain? Because I think the takeaway concept there is connection. That connection will remain important.
So, in the short term, I think it's something that we have to embrace, but there's the caution piece around it where there has to be checks and balances where the thought process is still there. It's not 100% AI dependent that the students
Oh
have
gosh, no, yeah,
no, yeah, we
absolutely.
have to caution that. I
The
totally agree.
arguments.
I totally
Yeah,
agree on that.
yeah.
Mark, now, you've been an educator for a very long time. You built many large schools, been part of boards, you've been part of accreditations. If you had the opportunity of saying, here's what I would do to change the approach in educations for high schools, what would you say? What would you do? What would your wish list be?
Well, I'm a really strong believer in schools that where constructivism and social constructivism prevail as pedagogical methods. And so, what constructivism is the idea that students construct their learning in context with teacher as facilitator. And social constructivism is where students rather work with each other to a certain extent. There's still room for teacher lecture and teacher transmission of information, but there are still systems in the world and sometimes individual schools. I've noticed this because I've had the opportunity to kind of walk around the world and see schools, and if I could do one thing, I would make sure that um, schools and all school systems are or become to a certain extent student-centered and constructivist in their approach to learning, and that we would sort of eradicate uh, pure teacher-centered lecture. And I think again with the emergence of AI as tutor, that lecture style approaches will become increasingly irrelevant, and we will move towards more of a constructivist environment that's more universal across systems. So that's kind of my belief. Anyway,
Oh, I
but
hope they do listen to you because you have the wealth of experience that you bring to the table. Maybe you should do a conference and speak to the ministry and say, like, these are the changes we need, and let's implement those changes, and we'll see,
oh, well, let's
great
do it
outcomes.
together. You've
Like,
got you've got some good ideas
you
too.
know
We've
what,
had some
Mark?
good
I'll always
discussions.
champion you. You know that, right?
I think
Um,
you're very articulate. I think you're very articulate with these ideas.
let's talk a little bit about the student experience. And since you have students from all over the world, I know you have students from Armenia, you have students from Africa, of course you have China, Vietnam, Georgia, all over Latin America. How is the experience for everyone else everyone at the school? How are they kind of embracing this wealth of multiculturalism that's coming into the school? How is that experience?
That's a great question, and I really like international schools because define I define them a little bit differently than like a multicultural school. And an international school for me is a school where students come from different countries or different contexts. Sometimes they're speaking different languages, but they bring with them those underlying cultural schemas, those ways of seeing the world that are fundamentally different. So they haven't usually been in country for a long time. And what's really interesting about an international school, so defined, is that students are then learning on a day-to-day basis, along with their teacher and in classes, how does this person from this other culture think? How do they negotiate the world? How do they see things? And I think that's a tremendously valuable learning experience. I raised my own children in different countries around the world, so they were able to negotiate firsthand those different cultural ways of thinking. It's really the cognition, the ways of thinking, and negotiation is required. And what I've also found in international schools, because these different groups of students from different contexts are negotiating with each other and learning from each other, it produces an automatic kindness. And I have to say, I've never been in an international school where students come from different contexts where that kindness isn't there. So I found, anyway, my observation is that it produces a really kind cultural, a kind school culture context that contributes to it tremendously. And I've really enjoyed being in these kinds of schools.
Thank you. Now, just a little bit about, your background that you come to NOIC with all this experience and knowledge of working in countries all over the world and bringing that experience. How have you led the school? How have your peers, your direct reports, so let's say the entire staff at the school kind of looked at you and followed your lead. How have you changed that attitude?
Yeah, well, I think again, having that background in different contexts, it makes you aware of how students from different cultures learn and think and approach this thing called school. But it also, and really importantly, makes you aware of your own assumptions and your own biases. So I think as a leader, I become increasingly humble as I go, as I experience the experience of leadership over the years, and as a leader, discussing how students from different contexts, what they value, what values are, what practices are. I think as a leader, I feel very responsible as a leader that we discuss this. We have a discussion available during staff meetings that we make ourselves aware of our own implicit biases, but also that we study and very explicitly understand where our students are coming from and how their backgrounds and contexts can best be understood to support their learning. So I
Oh,
would
and
say
I
it makes
totally
you it makes you humble. I think at
No,
the
I totally agree. And knowing you personally, I'm one of your biggest supporters because I know
oh
you come with that knowledge and experience that you can definitely turn around people, their thoughts, and how they look at the whole globalization. So, I give you credit for that, Mark. You're really good at that.
thank you so much.
I know we talked about boarding school, we talked about parents. Um, what would you want them to know? One about NOIC and how their child will progress through their program at NOIC. What's the one thing you would want to say? It's like, your son, your daughter coming here. This is what they will get. This is what you will get as a parent from them, and this is where they'll go.
Yeah. I think first and foremost that NOIC is a caring community and it's a safe community internationally based on our location, the composition of our school and where we've come from. And the academics at our school, I would want parents to know are very strong as can be seen through our university acceptances and student grades, and what I see in the quality of teaching and learning that happens in the school. And I would want parents to know that we offer many pathways for the student, so the student experience is tailored to individual needs. And what that means is that a student can, if a student wishes to change pathways, they can. Students can take the OSSD in 9 and 10 and then switch to the diploma for 11 and 12. There are many options. There are many, and so it allows for student evolution and growth, I think.
All right, Mark, in closing our conversation, and again, I really appreciate you taking the time for this podcast. I know you're a busy, busy man, and I do appreciate that. What would we say to a student who is kind of undecided, sitting on the fence, and deciding between, like, I'm looking at NOIC and I'm looking at another school? What would we share with the student or say to the student that no, you have to pick NOIC and this is why you would pick NOIC? I would tell them just because of Mark, you need
Yeah,
to
I
pick
would uh, I
NOIC,
would
but
just say to the student, please, we have a very, very kind and nice admissions team. So I would suggest that they get in touch with the admissions team. If the student we're applicant we're talking about is in the area, oh my gosh, come in for a tour and a discussion. We love to hold tours. And it's a really good idea to come and visit a school if you can, because again, you get a sense of that school culture, you get a sense of the teachers, you can get a sense of the peers in the school. Yeah, and I was just speaking to some visiting student applicants yesterday, and I love to do it as principal, and I always ask that people please come and introduce student applicants to me as well. And we can talk about the interesting projects that students are doing and the interesting initiatives that we have ongoing as well. So students can get a firsthand account. So my recommendation is, gosh, get a hold of the admissions team and we'll provide more information and virtual or in-person tours as well.
No, that's great. You have your in-house tours, and then you can also offer virtual tours because
Yeah,
our students will be international. So, we'll
right.
look for the virtual tours. What excites you about NOIC for this year? And looking down maybe 1 year, 2 years, what are you most excited about NOIC?
Well, I'm pretty excited about the growth of our three programs. We are um, accepting applications now to the IB diploma program, and I see the numbers of students that we'll be having for next year. I'm very excited about our admissions. I'm also very excited about growing our extracurricular program here at the Academy. And thirdly, and you touched on it earlier, Arthur, I'm really excited to see the ways that AI will evolved to support student learning, the learning coach tools, etc., and learning how we contextualize AI in light of an experience that we would like to have as personal as possible for each student. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question, and then maybe if you feel like you can add more about yourself and what do you do after the life after NOIC. What's the one best piece of advice you would want to share um, with leaders, or the best piece of advice you received as a leader?
Oh. Yeah, that's a great question. And I learned from a mentor at mine who is a senior prof at Queen's University, rather, when I was doing my PhD. And his advice to me, and I pass it on here, was always be in the business of being born. And what that means is always be a learner. And I'm really attracted to students who are passionate learners. I'm attracted to teachers also who are passionate learners. When I interview a potential teacher candidate, if they speak about things like the professional development they would like to experience or the learning that they're engaged in, that's what excites me. And I'm attracted to learners, and I always wish to build a community of learners in a school. So I think that's probably my best advice: is never sit back, never keep doing what you're doing for its own sake. Always be a learner, be a young, wide-eyed learner, and be in that process of being born.
Okay, no, that's great. Any thoughts on, what would you like to say? Your thoughts on our MSM? How's it working? We haven't seen anything as yet, but are you looking forward to a lot of students coming from MSM and moving
We're
them on?
we're very excited about our new partnership with MSM and looking forward to seeing how that evolves as the year progresses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.